I'm on the phone with Dots from the Retro Game Mechanics Explained YouTube channel, and he's recently put out a video on the Cries of the Pokemon from the first generation, how all that is generated from a technical perspective. And we're going to talk about that, but first of all, Dots, where are you from? And what's sort of your computer science background? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, in the United States, and I went to the Ohio State University for computer science and engineering, and I actually graduated with that degree this past December. As for how my computer science stuff started out, my high school actually didn't offer any computer science courses, and that was something I was really interested in. So I went to college for that because high school didn't really introduce me to that at all, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So who knew that would expand to so much stuff that I do now?
Yeah, that's interesting. I had sort of the opposite experience growing up. I mean, they taught me, I learned BASIC in, elementary school and stuff like that, and summer school and stuff like that. So glad to see that you sort of took the initiative there. All right, well, how did the actual channel get started? When did you start that, and why?
All right, so the Retro Game Mechanics Explained channel only started in late 2016, but I actually have been making videos for much later than that. My videos started as Super Mario World explained videos on my actual speedrunning channel, where I explained glitches and speedrun tricks. And people enjoyed those so much, and I thought I should expand to more games and stuff. So I made a dedicated channel to that. People also mentioned that they were willing to throw me money to make more videos, so I decided to monetize it as well, and it's been running for a good 2.5 years now.
Yeah, I think I caught on with some of those Super Nintendo videos. It's a very interesting system with, all the graphical modes, notably Mode 7, and things like that. And Super Mario World being a launch title is a very interesting game to analyze. So yeah, you did a lot of Super Nintendo stuff, but you've branched out into some other things, and most recently you did an episode on the Cries of the Pokemon from the first generation or so. First off, why did you pick that topic?
So Pokemon has always been one of my favorite games, and mainly because of the Pokemon themselves, I always found them pretty interesting. When I was growing up, I always liked the sounds they made because they're so peculiar and unique. And so those have always stuck in my head. I know for a couple years I had some Pokemon's Cry as my text ringtone. So I thought, well, I know that the first and second generation Pokemon Cries are generated on the fly and they're not just sound files. So let's look into how those are actually made.
Yeah, your video goes into pretty good detail actually about all the different sound channels on the original Game Boy and things like that. What were some of the interesting things you learned in that process?
The most interesting thing to me was finding the differences between the Game Boy's sound engine and the NES's sound engine. Even though the music that was generated from both consoles sounds very similar, their engines are quite different. Some other interesting things I found, I've known that some of the Pokemon Cries end with a crashing sound, and I always wondered why some of them did that. Almost half of them sound like they end in this boom sound, and it was interesting to me to find out why that actually happens.
And can you give a sort of a brief explanation of what that is? Is that some sort of weird quirk of the Game Boy sound hardware, or?
It just goes to a quirk of the algorithm that actually plays the cries. So there's 3 channels that are used for the Pokemon Cries, 2 pulse channels and a noise channel. And to create some of the different cries, they pitch shift it up and down. And that goes for the noise channel too. It gets pitch shifted up and down. But if the 2 pulse channels complete their sounds before the noise channel is done, then that pitch shift is canceled out for the rest of the cry. So maybe the first part, the noise channel is really high pitched, so high that you might not even be able to hear it. And then the ending, it reverts to its lower sound, so you actually hear that boom right at the end.
What's a particular cry that showcases that very well?
I believe the one I used in the video was Drowsy. It's a really, compared to Jinx's cry, which uses the same bass sound, the pulse channels go much quicker, but the noise channel is still super long to compare for Jinx's sound. So you can actually hear a good 3 or 4 notes at the end of that cry where you can really hear it.
And one thing we should note here, actually, in part of researching this and playing around with it, you actually built your own tool for simulating or even creating your own Pokemon sounds. Tell folks about that.
Oh, yeah, sure. So if you go to the webpage dotsarecool.com/rgme/tech/gen1cries.html, it's this cool little web app that lets you pick any of the original Gen 1 Pokemon and play their cry sound effect, but it also shows you each note command and what the waveforms look like as it's being played. And I actually used this page to help me understand how the cries were working in the first place, because to understand how they were working, I coded my own algorithm to create the cries themselves, and I was using them to compare back and forth how accurate my algorithm was. And I figured, well, here, if I just add some extra functionality, you can just like make your own cries, and I bet people would be interested in that. So I just went ahead and developed it even further.
Yeah, you got some really great stuff you did in that one, but you've also got a number of other videos. Why don't you tell us about a couple of them?
All right. My 2 favorites are the Pac-Man kill screen explained and the Super Mario World random number generation explained. The Pac-Man video goes into very high detail on how the kill screen exists in the game. If you beat level 254, you'll go to 255, and then half of the screen is just garbage for particularly no reason, but there is an actual reason, and it's pretty interesting. And the Super Mario World random number generation video is one of my favorites because it actually explains how what a player would think is completely random behavior of sprites and enemies or just the game in general really comes down to just this one very short algorithm that controls so much. And I go ahead and actually go into super detail all the way down to the assembly on how that function works.
Yeah, if you really want to get down into the details there, you totally can with some of your videos there. I find it very interesting. I want to shout out to one of my favorites, actually, which is the Super Mario Land 2 memory exploration bug that lets you finish the game very quickly if you know where to go in there while you're actually just roaming through like the cartridge and RAM and stuff like that. It's great how you showed that visually in that episode.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun making that one. I use a lot of scripts within an emulator to help with some of the visualizations, and in that one I was able to actually follow Mario while he travels throughout the entirety of the game's memory viewed as a level.
Yeah, great stuff. It really helps, even if you're not super technical, to sort of understand loosely what's going on. Any plans for the future? Any ideas you're working on right now you'd like to tell us about?
Sure. Right now, actually, I'm almost done with the reference video for the Pokemon Cries, that video that just came out, and that it will show all 151 Pokemon Cries in the same visualization that the previous video did. And it's a little bit more in-depth than the web app does. And then eventually I also want to go into the Generation 2 Pokemon. I know a lot of people were asking about that, and I did find out that the engine is very similar. It's just an upgraded version, so it should be pretty easy to add those in as well. And then for the non-Pokemon folks, I'm also still working on my Super Nintendo playlist that goes into details about the entirety of the system and all of the ins and outs and everything. This video will be going over all of the different types of inputs you can have, like controllers, multi-taps, mouse, and the Super Scope.
Oh, the Super Scope. I remember that. That'll be really interesting to see. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dots.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks.